Let's try it again. Good morning, brothers and sisters. Great. So today we will discuss, let me figure technology here. There we go. So as Ben mentioned, today we will discuss the last topic in our series, what we believe the story of our faith. For several months, 9 months, we have been learning about very important doctrines of our faith, what our core beliefs are as followers of Christ. We have been using this slide over here as a way to illustrate those main themes of creation, fall, cross, restore, and glory. Last Sunday, Ben put it very nicely. He reminded us how God created humanity for relationship with Him, reflection of His glory, and reigning over His creation. But in our sin, we rejected all those privileges. However, in His unfailing love, God sent His only begotten Son as a ransom on our behalf, so that those who believe in Him can be witness of His gospel and the representatives of God's goodness to the world. And one day, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords will return in all His glory to make right everything. To make right everything that is wrong, everything that is broken in this world. I hope that for the last couple of months, your faith has been renewed, strengthened, that your hope also has been strengthened and renewed. The purpose of this series was not only to provide you with that cognitive information so you can go and regurgitate when someone asks you, what does your church believe? I mean, that is very important, but it is incomplete. Through this series, the goal has been that our hope is strengthened, that we bring to the front of our mind the fact that this world is not all there is, but that we have a King and a Savior who will come and bring us home. We started this last circle in the graphic 3 Sundays ago. And let me show you what our doctrinal statement says about this. Today we will be looking at the fate of all creation. We believe that Jesus Christ will come again to fully renew all creation to its proper place and will be the rightful king over His kingdom for our good and His glory. God will renew all of creation with the purpose of bringing eternal glory to Himself and providing eternal joy to us. To get the full picture of what the Bible says about the fate of creation, I will divide this topic into 3 points. As you can see, this will also hit on topics we have already discussed. Point 1, how it was. Point 2, how it is. Point 3, how will be. So let's go back to the beginning, Genesis 1. Genesis 1 provides a beautiful picture of how creation was before the fall. Genesis 1:1 reads, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." In the biblical Hebrew, the word for heaven refers to simply the sky above. And the word for earth does not mean globe, but rather the land, the ground below us. Verse 2 says that the earth was without form and it was empty. Another version says the land was wild and waste. It describes the pre-creation state. The pre-creation state was unordered and uninhabited. We might call this nothingness. It's hard to picture, right? When it says that darkness was over the face of the deep, some scholars believe that this is referring to a dark, chaotic ocean. And this description is an ancient way of describing the non-reality that preceded creation. But in the midst of that darkness, God is present, ready to bring order so that life can flourish. I really appreciate this image and explanation provided by the Bible Project. God brings order in a series of 6 days. Each day starts with the phrase, "and God said," and then ends with the phrase, "and there was evening and morning." Every day addresses those problems introduced in verse 2, that there's no order and no inhabitants. So on days 1 through 3, God splits apart the unordered darkness into 3 ordered realms. Then days 4 through 6, God fills the uninhabited wasteland with creatures. So in other words, God brings order into the mess and chaos. He brings the realms of time, the realm of the skies and the sea, and the land. Then God fills these realms with inhabitants in days 4 through 6. And this is how it was. God brought chaos and nothingness into perfect order. The beautiful creation He made was in perfect harmony with its steward. But you and I know that this is not our present reality. When sin entered the world, it didn't only affect humans' relationship with God, but also humans' relationship with creation. All of God's perfect creation was impacted by sin. The ordered world began to be disordered and to decay. And this is our current reality. This is how it is now. And I will take you to Romans chapter 8, because I think the Apostle Paul uses a really interesting word picture to portray the current state of nature. Romans 8, 19 through 22, "For I consider that the suffering of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, no, not by his own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time." This passage is telling us that creation is groaning up to the present time like a woman in labor. The reason for the groaning is that creation has been subjected to frustration, to bondage, to decay. And this creation is waiting with eager anticipation for the children of God to be revealed, as verse 19 says. This last December 30th, to be exact, I was woken up by my wife. She told me that she thought it was time to go to the hospital because she was having contractions, and they were pretty regular. At that time, Beth was 38 weeks pregnant, and we knew that any time our son, Levi, would be making his entrance into the world. Because of those contractions, we knew that the time was even closer now. The pain was an indication that he could be here within the next couple of hours. It was a false alarm, right? But then that's a different story. He did, 4 days later, he did come. In this passage, however, Paul utilizes the picture of a woman in labor to illustrate how creation is waiting for something to happen. Creation is withering and writhing in pain while waiting for freedom from its suffering. And you and I can see it and feel it, right? We look around the world and we can see how creation has definitely suffered and is suffering the consequences of the fall. Extreme hot temperatures and bitterly freezing temperatures. Too much rain in some places and not enough rain in others. Storms and climatic events that destroy and kill. A couple of weeks ago, we were visiting family in Des Moines, and at one point, we had to seek refuge in their storage room in the basement due to a tornado warning in March. Unfortunately, 7 people were killed in that tornado and created significant destruction. The whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth, right up to the present time. Paul, in Romans 8, drops us back into the story of Genesis 1-3, where we find the description of how the human race fell into sin when the first human, Adam, sinned. This was not how it was supposed to be. We see there that Adam and Eve's rebellion disrupted the relationship between God, humanity, and creation. The creator order has shared somehow in that fall. Creation was subjected to futility or frustration. Creation is not what it ought to be. At the beginning of this series, when we were learning about creation, we saw that human beings were placed as directors or rulers over creation. And there was harmony. However, since the fall, nature is alienated from us and is alienated with itself. It is not as beautiful or great as it was supposed to be. The exile of humanity from God's presence led to the gradual decay of the natural order and the introduction of death. How many of you, in the midst of intense pain and intense suffering, have thought it is going to be like this forever? It is going to be like this forever. For most of my life, I was a really, really good sleeper. I remember my parents commenting to others about my incredible capacity to rest my head on the pillow and fall asleep. It was really great. A couple years ago, however, that capacity progressively disappeared. And staying asleep became extremely difficult. I remember waking up one night at 2 in the morning thinking, I'm done. This is never going to change. I will have this sleep issue for the rest of my life. I remember that feeling in the pit of my stomach. But then, another thought came to mind. Wait a minute. I was a good sleeper in the past. Maybe that will come back someday. Not today, obviously, but maybe next week or next month. A fact from the past provided some hope for the future. Even though my present circumstances included me being wide awake at 2 in the morning, drinking celestial seasoning, caffeine-free, sleepy time tea. So, what is our hope for the future in this present world of day and decay? As we saw in the previous section, we are expecting something to happen. Creation is giving us signs of this. And we need to jump to the very end of the Bible to try to understand what's going on, how creation will be restored. We don't have a lot of time to get into the details of these 2 chapters, but in the book of Revelation, chapters 21 and 22, information is provided about the new creation. As we recently saw, creation is currently groaning like a woman in childbirth. At this moment, currently, the earth is cut off from the full life of heaven. But a rebirth will take place soon. John, in the book of Revelation, doesn't specifically tell us what this new heaven and new earth will look like, but he uses end-time symbols and metaphors to describe this event. Let's see what Revelation 21, verses 1 and 2 says about this. Then he showed me a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of God and of the Lamb, in the middle of its street. On either side of the river was the tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruits, yielding its fruits every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. This description sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? He is describing here a brand new Garden of Eden. John saw the tree of life there, accessible to all and eternally yielding fruits. It could do this because its roots had access to the eternal river of life, which can sustain all of the new creation because it flows from the presence of God Himself. In this new Eden, all humanity, all nations will be together. Humanity is not represented by a couple, like in Genesis, Adam and Eve, but everyone will be there cultivating the garden. However, it's not just a return back to the garden. It is actually a step forward into a new Jerusalem. Revelations 21, verses 10 through 14. And he carried me away in the Spirit, John is talking, to a mountain great and high and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. It shone with the glory of God, and its brilliance was like that of a very precious jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates and with 12 angels at the gates. On the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. There were 3 gates on the east, 3 on the north, 3 on the south, and 3 on the west. The wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Now, I can't help it. I need to make a comparison here. If John talks about a new Jerusalem, the question is, how different is this new Jerusalem from the old Jerusalem? Well, let's see it. The old Jerusalem was built by human hands, but the new Jerusalem is built by God himself. The old Jerusalem was the first and only city where God resided in a permanent holy house, the temple. But in the New Jerusalem, there's no need for a temple because the presence of God is in every square inch of the new world. The old Jerusalem was the first city where kings worshipped the true Creator, but these kings were corrupt and dishonest. However, the new creation is ruled by a divine king who is holy, perfect, and just. The old city of Jerusalem was the promised land for the people of Israel. However, brothers and sisters, the New Jerusalem is our promised land, the place where everything will be restored. In verses 15 through 21 of chapter 21, John attempts to describe what the New Jerusalem will be like. The one who spoke with me, he says, had a gold measuring rod to measure the city and its gates and its wall. He says the heavenly city has 4 sides, each with 3 gates corresponding to the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he mentions 12 huge foundation stones which correspond to the 12 apostles. After this, John says the heavenly city is a perfect cube, each side being around 1,400 miles. Then we are told that the walls were about 200 feet thick. That place will be unlike anything you've ever seen before. But there is a twist here. Verse 22 says, I saw no temple in the city. Why? Because the presence of God and the Lamb that was once limited to the temple in the old Jerusalem are present in every square inch of the new world. There's a new humanity there, fulfilling the calling placed on them all the way back on page 1 in the Bible. Humanity will rule in God's image, partnering with God in taking this creation into new and uncharted territory. As it was mentioned in the chart, in the Old Jerusalem, God's presence was limited to the Holy of Holies, where only once a year only the high priest, could enter. But this is not the case in the New Jerusalem. There will be no need for a physical temple, or there will not be a Holy of Holies, because the fullness of God's presence will be everywhere. All of the new creation will be God's Holy of Holies. We don't have a lot of exact details about this new creation, but I know the answer. I have solved the mystery. Do you want to hear it? Do you want to hear it? Physically resurrected bodies need a physical place to live. Physically resurrected bodies need a physical place to live. A new car is still a car. A new body is still a body. A new earth is still an earth. New is the adjective, earth, the noun, the thing. It is a thing. God wouldn't call it the new earth if it were not a real earth. When we talk about new creation, remember that it won't be a dreamlike place. It will be a magnificent physical place. Not a ghostly place, but God's central dwelling place. We will be relocated to a new earth. As I mentioned in the first point, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth, and he saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. What I'm trying to say here is that the problem with earth, with nature, with plants, with animals, is not its physicality. Earth problems is sin and the curse. This new city, God's new creation, will be a physical place that will shine without the dark clouds of sin, death, and gloom. God made Adam from earth and for the earth. He made humanity to rule it for his glory. Redemption is not escape from earthly life. It is a reclamation of earthly life. When Jesus died, God wasn't done with his old body. His resurrection body was his old body made new. God is not done with these bodies or this earth. Our old bodies will be made new, and this old earth will be made new. In Genesis, the Redeemer is promised. In Revelation, the Redeemer returns. Genesis tells the story of paradise lost. Revelation tells the story of paradise regained. In Genesis, men and women fail as earth rulers. In Revelation, righteous humanity rules the new earth under King Jesus. In Genesis, Satan and sin disrupt God's design. In Revelation, Satan and sin won't thwart God's plan. I will invite the worship team to come up. Can you feel the hope in the air? My dear brothers and sisters, are you discouraged? Are you in pain? Are you suffering? Are you losing hope? If you are in Christ, this is not the end. A glorious day is coming when we will live with our Creator. When our God and Father makes his home with men and women. Will you stand up with me? What I will ask you to do is we're going to read this passage out loud all together. as you read it, reflect very deeply on what he says. Can we do that? All together, we'll read this passage. At the count of 3, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people.